All right, everybody, welcome to this live episode of the Compliance Guy. As always, I want to begin by saying thank you so much to each and every single one of you who's taking time out of what I know is an extremely busy day to tune in, log on, and just hang out with me and my special guest. And today, I said it earlier when I was making sure everybody was well aware that I had a live podcast today. I'm so excited to welcome my friend, and I get to call her my friend because we've become friends, Traci Brown. And Traci is just, besides being an incredible investigator and detector of all things fraud, lies, identity theft, BS, whatever you want to refer it to, she's also an incredible athlete. She was on the cycling team. She's won numerous medals, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that. But I got the opportunity to meet Traci when we were in Las Vegas earlier this year at the AMBA conference. And Traci was the keynote speaker, and we had this opportunity to engage in um, making this determination as to whether or not somebody was telling the truth or whether they were just full of it. And we had three people that were part of this panel, and mine, I wasn't certain as to what I was going to be asked until Traci revealed the question. And I think mine had to do, if I'm not mistaken, Traci, with being at the Playboy Mansion.
Oh, you got that one, yeah. Should I tell people what we did, really?
Yeah, we can. But again, before we do that, I just want to say I'm so excited to have you on this program. And I know I'm starting to see a lot of people logging on. We are streaming live, not only on LinkedIn, but we're also on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter, and 2 or 3 other live streaming platforms. And this will be recorded for anybody who misses this program today. And then you'll also be able to find this on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, RSS, and more than 80 podcast platforms. So without further ado, I want to welcome Traci Brown to the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad we get to do this. I know scheduling was a trick, but I'm psyched to be here.
Yeah, and I love when people were using words from like the 80s and 90s, psyched, stoked. It just kind of makes me feel back in my element. So thank you for
calling me old?
Listen, I think I'm actually older than you. I've got 5 grandbabies.
Oh yeah, no, you're old.
Yeah, I am old. I am. They are starting to compare me to dirt that they're pulling from different historic sites. So that's when you know. Yeah. So with that said, I have turned on the chat feature today for anybody who is interested in asking Traci questions, because we are going to be going through and talking about her latest book, which is How to Detect Lies, Fraud, and Identity Theft. And I have gone through this book. I have dog-eared a whole bunch of pages. I have a whole bunch of things that I want to talk to Traci about. But here's the thing. Whether you are a practice manager, a CEO, CFO, HR director, investigator, government investigator, whatever your role is, it's so important to make sure that you understand so many of the different techniques, the different things that you should be looking for to be able to determine whether or not the wool is being pulled over your eyes or somebody is actually being genuine with you. And there are so many things, because over my 27 years of being in healthcare, I've been so blessed to engage in investigations that were tied to the Office of Inspector General or to the Department of Justice for a key TAM or whistleblower case, or the U.S. Attorney's Office. And, as Traci and I were talking about, spending time in my earlier career on Capitol Hill, working with various members in the upper and lower chambers, man, you got to know how to detect the BS from, I don't know, fantasy or fiction or whatever it is. So with that said, we'll talk about where you can get a copy of this book. Traci has her own podcast as well, which is really cool. I've been watching so many of these episodes, but beyond that, she's also been featured in Time Magazine, and she's really gotten a ton of accolades for her work. But more than that, she's really embarked into the true crime arena beyond assisting in investigations that had to do with cold cases, fraud, waste, abuse, all of these incredible things. So I'll let Traci, as we kind of get into this, talk about it. But really, what is it out of the gate, Traci, that folks need to pay attention to when they engage in a conversation with not only their employees, but I think a lot of the men and women that are listening in today too are wondering, how do I catch my spouse if I don't trust something that's coming out of their
mouth? Well, right. So that's what I focus on, is how to detect lies, right? And lie detection comes at the intersection of body language, tone, and words. So when I advertise myself, I say I'm a body language expert, which is true, but that's not enough in and of itself to detect lies. It's sexy. It gets me in the door to speak at a lot of conferences. So the number one thing that our law enforcement looks for is a shift in baseline behavior. And we all have a normal way that we behave. And then when we get to fabricating things, what happens is we use a different part of our brain. And in fabrication, that's a code word for a lie. And what happens is we go into, it's called cognitive overload. So your brain is doing too much. And the body language falls off the plate. So what's the brain doing? Well, it's remembering the real story, trying to remember the story you just told. It's adding time, adding emotion, like all these little details. And it doesn't, like, something's got to give. And so that's really what you want to look for. And you would notice like a shift in behavior around a incriminating, like potentially incriminating question, right? And that's where small talk comes in so handy, because like if you just start out any conversation with small talk, with questions and conversation that people don't have any reason to lie about, like like how many dogs do you have, like that kind of thing, or how many kids do you have, or where'd you grow up, like those kind of things, then you can start to see those shifts and go, okay, wait a minute, you need to dig deeper, right? And it's important not to go into any conversation where you're like, I'm going to catch them, I'm going to bust them. And because not only are you going in biased, and that's I think really dangerous, but what you want to do is be more elegant about it, and essentially give them enough rope so they'll hang themselves. And that happens when you dig deep around certain points where they've given off signs that say, okay, wait a minute, something's not quite right here. And when you elegantly do that and just ask a few of the right questions and use silence to your benefit, right? Because like when you ask a question and then you're silent and you don't talk, and you ask it like you expect an answer, you will hear some fantastic things that come out of the mouth of whoever is across from you. And so just using that technique can be really beneficial, because what happens is you create a stress point for them, and you've just got to be more comfortable being uncomfortable than they are. Let them talk first.
Yeah. That's awesome, because you're reaffirming some of the things that I do. So one of the things when I'm doing an investigation on behalf of a client, or when I'm working on a government case, I will always start off with, just trying to get that person to be my friend for the duration of that encounter, right? Good morning, how are you? I try to smile. I try to be engaging, endearing, warm, because what I'm trying to do, right, is to break down any barriers. Because people, when they hear that this is an interview for an investigation, naturally, am I correct in saying they become very defensive, and their defense mechanisms come into play, and they put up these barriers, these walls, and they make themselves very aloof a lot of times, even if they're not the target of the investigation. So, when I ask a question, I oftentimes will just shut up, So I understand that blah. And then I just sit there and I take my pen and I just look at the person and I wait. And it's so interesting to me that that silence can make people just verbal vomit out of
Oh,
nowhere.
yeah. Absolutely. Well, anytime you're in any kind of investigation, people are in anxiety, right? And anxiety is really defined as putting a negative event in the future and focusing on it. And so in any kind of investigation, like where there's smoke, there's fire, and they know that, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you're gonna find what you think you're gonna find, and maybe you're gonna find something else. And so you're gonna get people who are more tense or more chatty or more acting aloof. They know they're being watched, right? So gaining rapport with folks is one of the most important skills that you can have. And I have a whole I spoke on gaining rapport pretty much exclusively for about 8 years. And there's something to it, like just starting to understand how to connect with people, put them at ease, and make them feel comfortable, like get them in a conversation.
Yeah. One of the things that I picked up in your book, and it's actually right out of the gate, is you use a term survival. And you break it down. Can you break that down for our listeners today? What survival, is from an acronym standpoint?
Oh gosh, by memory, no.
Okay, so let me kind of kick that off. So
Yeah.
the S that you have is to size up the situation, surroundings, physical condition, and equipment. Right?
Yeah, and all of this, here's the deal. All this, it's right out of the military handbook, right? I think the Marine handbook. And so here's the thing. Situational awareness is key. And most of us, and I say this in my talk, I say it a different way. Most of us are paying so much attention to ourselves. We're just not paying attention to what goes on around us. And that is important, for lie detection. It's important for threat. I think these days where everyone thinks it's cool to just go start shooting people in a crowd, I think you have to be aware. You have to be aware of what's going on around you, not necessarily in a like where you feel threatened kind of way, but little things are signs. There's almost always signs about what's going to happen next. And to the extent that you decide to not pay attention, and sometimes I purposely don't pay attention because I think I pay a lot of attention a lot of times. And sometimes, you know what? I just put on my noise canceling headphones and don't pay attention. And you know what happened to me the last time I quit paying attention? When I had my noise canceling headphones on, I was because I just wanted to be left alone. I was sitting. I was going to Louisville, Kentucky, to speak at the. I spoke at the Bowling Proprietors Association. So all these people own bowling lanes. They were so fun, and I was on the plane, and someone put trying to put a suitcase up above me, wasn't paying attention. You know what happened? Suitcase freaking falls on my head. And it was heavy too. And that is, I was not paying attention. So you don't pay attention, you pay with pain. I got that. And so I don't do that anymore.
So now you're paying attention, and that's one thing, I talk about my wife all the time, and, we love to go out to eat, and, I struggle in social situations, right? One, I'm socially awkward, but two, I have anxiety when I'm in a crowd, right? So for me,
yeah, my husband does too.
yeah. So for me, with some of my background and everything, I'm constantly, my eyes are always circulating, my peripherals, I'm looking at everything, and my wife will look at me and she'll be like, "Hey, I'm right here."
Look
Right?
at me. Yeah.
Yeah. And, it's just one of those things where, you made a great point, because every day, all you have to do is turn on the news to, again, be disheartened by another innocent person being shot. And you ask yourself, how do they put themselves into that situation? Or, were they in a place where they shouldn't have been? Or were they aware of the place that they were going? I mean, like shopping malls now. I mean, it's crazy what's going on. But um, back to your acronym. So it's survival, right? So we talked about the S. U is for use of all your senses. And I think that's what we're talking about right now, being aware of your surroundings, hearing, listening, you know,
Well,
go
yeah,
ahead.
and it's noticing what's different and what's out of place. Because what happens is, because let's face it, we don't want to cause too much of a stir, right? Because we
Right.
want to fit in and go about our business. Well, you don't have to, but you can get yourself out of there if something's not right.
Right.
Right. And I think that's the key is, we're taught to pay attention to a lot of things, what's on our phone and all these things in our situational awareness and our reading of, what's going on around us has just trust in our gut. It's fallen by the wayside, I think, a lot in general. And so, in anything that you see that's out of place, like don't pay attention the first time, really,
Right.
because the second time is there could be problems. So whether that's in a mall or when you're having a conversation with your spouse about where were they last night, or or you're in an investigation, like what really did happen to all that the box of masks that or several truckloads of masks, whatever it is, right?
Right.
So that's the basis of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the R, the V, the I, the V, the A, and the L. So here's what we have. Remember where you are, vanquish fear and panic,
Mm-hmm.
improvise and improve, value living, act like the natives, and live by your wits.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are all, like, for me, I look at those and I go, "Oh yeah." And the light bulb clicks for me. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what brings me back to that situational awareness like you're talking about. But
Mm-hmm.
um I want to move into, because you have really had an opportunity to work on some incredible cases, and I know there's a lot that are ongoing investigations, so you can't
Mm-hmm.
talk about those. But can you talk about some of your past cases that you've been able to work on where there was a large fraud perpetrated against either an entity, a government agency, an individual, and really how you helped to determine that
Mm-hmm.
behavior and sort of how people were able to ferret out and
Mm-hmm.
lead to, a good outcome.
Yeah. The biggest one that I've worked on was 22 million, and we were able to stop that transaction from going down. So, there was a financial advisor here in Denver, and a guy walked in the office and said, "I have a $22 million check, because I sold my company, and I want you to invest it for me, and um, I'll be back." And so there's so many red flags just in that. But here's the problem. Okay, so the red flags are what? No one with a $22 million check is going to walk into your office that has a legit check, right? And this sounds silly, right? But
Right.
all the big transfers like that are just that. They're transfers. They're not checks, right? And then I'll be back tomorrow. Okay, so that was a little sketchy. And then he had just like a little bit too much information about where this money came from. But then here's the problem. The problem is that the investment advisor, well, there's another problem. Where she worked, I know their fees and they're way too high. Okay. So I'm not going to tell you where she worked, but different people who have $22 million aren't going to spend what they charge. Okay.
Yeah, you're talking about the investment fees, the broker fees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know what they are. And anyway, okay. So I don't want to throw anyone under the bus too bad. But then the problem is that you start to lose your senses, because the investment advisor, she's like, okay, I'm going to get my percentage of that. And like, she wants this to come through. Right. So all of a sudden she calls me, she's like, and she kind of knows this. Right. And she got a funny vibe from the guy, but she wanted the money. And so she calls me and she's like, "Can you train me real quick overnight on what I should look for?" And I said, "Well, you got all these red flags here. Are you aware of that?" And she's like, "Yeah, but." I'm like, "No, yeah, but. No, yeah, but. That's not no, okay." And so I think ended up, we had a conversation where we didn't even get to body language. We just talked about the stuff me and you talked about just now, situational awareness and what should happen versus what is happening. And I think what happened, because the guy's like, I'll be back tomorrow at 2. And because she had an office by herself, and I think she hired security to be in there with her for the day. Like plainclothes security, and she wanted me to come, and I was like, oh boy, I don't know if I want to get involved in that, because people will embed me in their teams from time to time to like sales teams or things like that, where I'm just like part of, like, nobody knows who I am,
like a secret shopper.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, just like an extra part of the team, extra secretary or whatever. And anyway, the guy never came back. So we were able to determine that she needed to not do this just by the things that we went through. So we didn't even get into the fine points of deception, right? And because you didn't need to, because the situational awareness was all you needed to know that this is not good. The harder, I guess, more intricate cases that I've worked on, I've had like a trend this year, because I don't work on a ton of cases. I work on a few. Mostly what I do is keynotes. The trend now is, for in a divorce case, is for lawyers to tell the parent who wants to have the kid full time that they are abusing the other parent is sexually abusing the kid. And the kids are small, like 4, 5 and under. And kids are parrots at that age. Right. They don't have a lot of commentary on their own, right? And so what happened is so the dad calls me, and at this point, by the time people call me, everyone in the case is crazy. Everyone. And I know that. And I can't take and it's probably like the same way when people call you. Like, by the time you get called, like, things are off the rails.
Right.
And so the dad calls me, and he's like, the mom is crazy. And now there's this video of her interviewing the kid who said daddy touched him. Okay. Now here's the deal. So I was like, send me the video. So, and they want to use that in court. That's what they want to use in court. I said, send it over. For one, okay, so here's how the video looks. There's a kid wearing a Batman suit, rolling around on the floor with a pacifier, and the mom goes, tell me where daddy touched you, right? And the TV's on, and he doesn't want to be doing this interview. Okay, so I'm like, God, clearly, like, this kid has been coached, but I need like to figure out what's gone on, really. Like, like, I can't just say that. Like, I need something to hang my hat on. I didn't quite have it. And I didn't have it. And besides that, okay, anything that is admissible in court needs to be done by a child forensic psychologist. I am not. I am clear that I am not that, and I'm not going to do that anytime soon. Okay. And I didn't know. Like, I wanted to help the dad, because no judge should accept this evidence. This shouldn't. But and now I'm involved, right? And I'm like, God, what is it? What is it about this? So I have a team of retired federal agents that I lean on from time to time, because I don't think anybody knows everything, and I certainly don't. So I sent it to him. He takes a quick look, and this video is not more than a minute and 40 seconds or so. He goes, here's what it is. He goes, here's how you know he's been coached, is because he's young enough to have a pacifier, and his line was, daddy touched my private parts. And he goes, that language is way too advanced for a kid in a pacifier. And I'm like, that's it. That's why I didn't get. So see, I learn all the time. And I do believe it was thrown out. They wanted to bring me on the stand, and I'm never going to go on a stand, because body language is not admissible in court. And, I'm not retired FBI or anything. I've been lucky enough to train alongside in some of those same classes. but that's just a different level when you're doing that every day, and that's okay.
And that reminds me of like this episode, so I just got out of the hospital yesterday, right? It was one of these things that just popped up on what is today? Thursday. So on Monday, I was feeling fine. Tuesday didn't feel so great, and my wife's like, "Look, you got some underlying stuff going on. Let's get you to the hospital."
Yikes.
So go to the hospital, whatever, and I'm laying in the emergency room, and whole long story. But anyways, when you're in a hospital, you have limited number of channels, and unfortunately, the channel that I was landing on was Dr. Phil.
Well, let's talk about Dr. Phil, though. I want to hear your story. Dr. Phil is a very, very skilled forensic psychologist. Yes, like he is not a joke. That guy, no. Like you think he is not.
Yeah. I just, like I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but like, I think of these TV shows and I think of like Jerry Springer and, Dr. Phil and, the ex-bodyguard from Jerry Springer, Steve. And, I just I'm like, come on, man, really? But anyways, this was it was a very serious show, and it was just about what you were talking about. This wife was accusing the husband of abusing and molesting their children. And it was crazy because, I was watching Dr. Phil and he was letting this woman tell the story. And then he would turn to the husband and he would say, "Are you a monster?" And that was it. And you're looking for like quivering lips or darting eyes or stuff like that, but whatever. But then he turned back to, the mother and he's like, "Did you ever report this?" "Why not?" You made an accusation that he tried to poison your child and you called poison control. Or no, did you call poison control? And she's like, "Well, no, I didn't." "Did you report it to?" And you could see him starting to unravel her story. Right. And I always wonder about people because, to me, I'm of the mindset that if you tell a lie, you have to continue that lie.
Oh yeah.
And the more you continue the lie, the bigger it gets, the more it snowballs and the deeper you get yourself into this. I mean, and that leads to the deception. And I think that's one of the things that you do really well. Can you talk about deception and how you determine somebody is being deceptive or how you know that you're being deceived?
So what I look for is mismatches between the body language and the words. Right. And the easiest one, and we talked about this in Vegas, like when someone shakes it for a yes or no question, right? This means yes, not nodding your head, shaking your head. This means no. Right. And so, whenever the body language and the words don't match, that's when you got a hot spot. And for a direct yes or no question, that's it's pretty easy. Like if I said, like I asked my husband, "You want chicken for dinner?" And he was like, "Yeah." Right, shaking his head no. And so that's a really easy one, like on a direct yes or no question. Now if it's a longer question, then a longer conversation, then you gotta look for different signs, right? The mismatches, right? Look for, when do they cross their arms? Are they crossing their arms all the time? Is there a certain tell that they seem to lean on when you think they may be going off the rails, right? And so it's and I'm looking at tone, I'm listening for language, and these are the things that I'm listening for. So like one of the things in because I do study statement analysis just a little bit, and the difference is if someone says you ask them a question and they say no. Well, and if you ask them a question and they say never, those are very different, right? And the never happens to show a lot of history of being deceptive, right? Yep. So little things like that is what I'm looking at.
Yep. So I want to read something, if it's okay. I want to read something out of your book. Because there's really, like, the book is really, really good. But for me, there's like, I'm always looking for these nuggets of information, things that I can tuck away. But you know, there's this passage that you write here, and it says, some people are great liars and are guilt-free. These are individuals without a moral compass or those who are mentally ill. Others have an overwhelming sense of guilt when they lie. How do you differentiate between these two types? Go ahead.
How do I differentiate between? Well, that takes a longer conversation, right? It does. Yeah. And even in cases of mental illness, about 90% of them will leak deception somehow, some way. And we're looking head to toe. We're not just looking at their face. So on a certain level, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're on the mental illness scale. The thing is, mental illness is a hot topic right now.
Right.
And narcissism is at the top of the interest level, I think, because of politics. And the narcissism that people think was just on Trump's side, well, I can guarantee you it's on the other side too. Guarantee it. And so it's a hotter topic, and sometimes you don't need the differentiation. The problem is, if you go around making it too hard and trying to put people in boxes and things like that, you're not going to see what's right in front of you. Right. And what's in front of you is what's most important.
Yep. You know, and you bring up the word narcissism, right? And, you know, look, throughout history, we've seen political leaders, we've seen religious leaders who truly fit the definition of a narcissist. And I think some people have a misperception for what a narcissist actually is. And, you know, for me, a narcissist is somebody who is completely self-absorbed. You know, they can't see the forest beyond the trees and the fantasy world that they live in. And everything is about them. Everything is me, I. And they refer to themselves in, what is it, the first person? Is that what our former president used to be, or is it the third person? I always miss those.
No, I don't think he did a lot of third person.
It was a lot of first person.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of first person. Now, here's the thing about narcissism. It is on the scale of mental illness.
Okay.
It's on the bottom rung, right? And that is because it is actually developed. It's a defense mechanism. It's not I guess like truly ingrained, born that way mental problem.
Right.
And it comes from not being seen and heard, not feeling seen and heard when you're a kid. And everybody I know that's a narcissist has a history of abuse or some kind of situation like that, where, you know what, they just decided they got to take care of themselves, and they're going to pay attention to themselves, and they're going to be seen and heard, and that's how it's going to be. And so that's what we see. Does it make them a bad person? Sometimes, not all the time. There's a lot of highly functioning narcissists, but it can make them difficult to be around, because everything that they say is designed to make them look like the good guy.
Yep. It reminds me of a TV show. I don't know if it's on HBO or Showtime or whatever. I've been addicted to it. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called Succession.
You know what? I watched the first episode and I didn't know if I wanted to watch anymore. So what do you think?
I love it. I am absolutely addicted to the show. So one, it shows it's really about family dynamics, right? Everybody's looking at it from the perspective of, oh, this is a media conglomerate, media giant, you know, and it's showing all the corruption that goes on inside those organizations, hostile takeovers, division of these kind of things. But as you were talking, it reminded me of one of the antagonists, if you will, well, it reminded me of the antagonist and the protagonist in the show. And for me, one of the individuals, his name is Kendall Roy. He's one of the sons, and he calls himself, or refers to himself, as the eldest son. But the truth is, he's reminded he's not the eldest son, and that, you know, everything that he has suffered at the hands of his father, and everything that he's been subjected to, and everything that I've always tried to do what's right, and I've always done this, and and not taking into consideration that he had 3 other siblings that were hoisted into the same boat with him by this, very abusive, verbally abusive father who, plays mind games. And I'm telling you, it is, watch the show.
Okay.
I literally just finished the season finale of season 4 last night, and I am like just itching. My body's itching for the next season. It is that good. Now it's on a different level from Yellowstone.
I love Yellowstone. You know what I've been watching too is Ozark.
Oh, I love Ozark.
Ozark is fantastic. It's all about fraud. Love that.
Oh, Jason Bateman is fantastic, and the young girl that's in there, she's awesome.
Yeah, really good.
Yeah. So I wanna try to, because I know, when we were in Las Vegas, we talked, and you were talking to healthcare professionals, right? And in our industry, fraud is running rampant. Durable medical equipment, the billing of services
billing
of services. Can you talk about some of, what you prepared for and going into the AMBA keynote speech that you did? And by the way, it was fantastic.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah. We had a great time. So I really, what we talked about in there is, there was a lot of things between, and I'm trying to remember back here, is the check really in the mail or not? Right. Did the insurance company really, receive the claim, or did they just not want to try to find it? Right. And here's the thing. It's all these little bitty things that add up to huge hassles, right? Because lies cost you time, money, and energy. That's what they cost you. And in those, that's just it. Time, money, and energy. And it comes in a lot of different ways. So those were some of the things that we talked about. And I think we talked about tone. We talked about the right questions to ask, so that you put people under that cognitive load, and they will tell you what's really going on, right? And the easiest question is, you know what? It seems like there's more you want to say about that, or more you have to say about that, or you can go, okay, let's talk about what really happened. Right? So you're not calling him a liar, but you are letting him know, hey, I'm on to you. So and those, when said with sweetness and kindness, can really get you really far.
And, in your book, you talk about lies, right? Since we're talking about lies right now, and you talk about the different types, right? You talk about exaggerations, and those being an attempt to magnify or overstate attributes, accomplishments, or events beyond fact, right? This is maybe tied to that narcissist. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong on that, but like, I find narcissists are always exaggerating the facts. They're always, embellishing or taking something to a level beyond maybe what it actually was. Is that fair?
I don't have science on that. The beat on the street is definitely possible.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
And then we have fabrications, right? Which is an attempt to make up non-existent facts or attributes. To me, I feel like fabrications probably fall on that lower rung, or maybe somewhere on the rung of mental illness, right?
People, not necessarily. It can be really a protective mechanism.
So people living in a fantasy world and fabricating these stories to.
It could be like, if I ask you, hey, where'd you go last night? And you're like, oh, I just went to the store to pick up a gallon of milk. And you really went to the bar. Right. So that's fabrication.
That's not a direct lie. I don't know what other.
Well, it is a lie. It's a kind of a lie, right? It's a kind of lie. It's a fabrication.
Okay. It's not it wouldn't be a deceptive dismissal.
Is it deceptive?
So an attempt to refute or maintain that a statement of fact is in error, or an event did not
deceptive
occur.
Denial. Yeah. So that's like, if you just said no, that's deceptive denial.
Okay.
I went to the bar, or I went to the store to get a gallon of milk. That is fabrication. So you see, you got 2 in 1 there, right? It doesn't take very much to get a couple. We could probably keep building on it.
Yeah, I think we definitely can. And there's minimization, which, I think this one was kind of interesting, which is an attempt to underreport or reduce to the least possible degree any perceived negative fact, event, or attribute. Do you think that's tied to a defense mechanism maybe, or a sense of guilt? Maybe that somebody who had knowledge of something didn't want to.
I think they just don't want to talk about it. And that's a form, it's a form of hiding things. So I interviewed, who was it? Mark McClish on my podcast, and he's a statement analysis expert. And he said, Bruce Jenner, well, now it's Caitlyn Jenner. Someone asked him something and he goes, "Oh, I just had my Adam's apple shaved." Right? Because they asked him if he was transmuting, or I don't know all that, right? Transferring over to be a woman. Right. And he goes, "No, I just had my Adam's apple shaved." So the word just is that's the word you're looking for, because the word just is an attempt to minimize.
Got it.
Whatever it is.
Now this one, my wife kind of harps on me all the time about omission. An attempt to leave out critical facts for information perceived as harmful or irrelevant to the individual's position. So I tell my wife, I'm not omitting facts. I just didn't find that disclosing more than what was required was.
Well, now this is what my husband says when the auditors come around. He's in aerospace. He's like, "We just stopped talking." Like that is omitting information. And there's a fine line there between what you need to say and not, and is it a lie or not? And that's, I'm not the karma police. That's up to the user.
The karma police. I love it. So, in the very beginning, we started talking about baselining, right? And you started to say, look, and I think this is really the critical aspect for me, because I want our listeners who are compliance officers, auditors, HR professionals, I want them to be able to understand that, excuse me, you can't just dive straight into saying, "Tell me what you did," right? You have to baseline somebody, right? So in your book, you use examples like, "Can you tell me how to spell your first name correctly?" Right? Especially if you have a name like Emily or Sean or John, or, something that has multiple variations to its spelling, right? So you kind of get them, maybe less defensive, right? So, "Can you tell me how to spell your name properly?" "Sure. Sean." Okay. "Where do you live?"
Yeah.
Right. So you're just trying to get somebody. When you say baseline, are you asking these questions to be able to see when, what triggers a person, right? Because a person's not going to get triggered by answering, "Where do you live?"
No, they're not. And what I'm looking for is body language, tone, and words, right? How do they answer? How quickly do they answer? What's their volume? What's their tone, timbre, and pitch? How quickly do they speak? These are all the things that that you can get off of these little bitty questions. How do they move in their chair? What's their blink rate, blink weight? How dilated are their eyes? Like, all of these things are what I'm looking for. And I can, I've doing this a long time, so I can do a quick scan and be like, "Okay, cool, got it." And then, when the questions get more potentially incriminating, like you start to see a shift, and it's like, okay, this is like, at certain points, like, this is where you need to ask deeper questions, right? But by the same token, you can also say, "Okay, wow, they're telling the truth," right? And in one of the stories I did for media on Cleo Smith out of Australia, the little girl stolen out of her tent, I looked at the parents and I'm like, "God, you know what? They are not lying. The parents they did not do this." And it would be really easy to look at some of those signs and go, "Oh, they did it," right? But whenever you look at one sign, or if you don't take the whole picture into account, then you're gonna get a false reading, right? And I told the reporter, I was like, I just don't think I'm not seeing deception here, right? So there's an art and a science to it, and it's not the kind of thing where you can read a book or go to a keynote and be like, okay, cool, I got it, right? Because there's so many caveats, and it's a fun study, right? To watch videos and see, what you can find and find some analysis on it, because there's some great analysis out there. Some friends of mine are the Behavior Panel on YouTube, and those guys are fantastic. And I love what they're doing, and it's just real hard-nosed analysis. And if you really want to study, I mean, if you're done with my book, then go watch their videos.
Yeah, and yeah, I definitely am interested in that. Look, I have so many things that, in my job, I'm very blessed, and I get to do, all of these really cool, projects, and I work on behalf of a lot of different law firms. But, some of the numbers that you put in here were actually really interesting. You were talking about the Federal Bureau of Investigation and their interrogators, and what they've indicated is that 80 to 85% accuracy in lie detection, not utilizing their opinions, right?
Right.
So, you said the best FBI interrogators have an 80 to 85% accuracy in lie detection and do not use opinions.
Right. You got to get out of that, because opinion is what'll kill you.
Yeah, it's conjecture, right? It's subjective.
It's guessing is what it is. And the problem is sometimes you don't know when it is, when you're doing it and not. So that's why it's always good to have a partner if it's an important investigation, so that you have just more of a chance.
Yeah. So a couple of last things that I wanted to ask you about, because eyes for me are really important. And one of the things that I started thinking about as we were talking about somebody's eyes, right? Their blink rate. Like, I was thinking, and maybe I'm being an idiot about this, but I was thinking, like, if I'm going to get interrogated, like, I'm going to start off by going in there and just throwing the interrogator off. I'm going to be like blinking my eyes, like, what's wrong with this guy? It's a tick. I don't know, so maybe when they get to those hardcore questions, it kind of makes it hard. I don't know. Maybe I'm being foolish about that, but you talked about a couple of things, right? There were two myths that you kind of dispelled. The first one is shifty-eyed people are liars.
Not true.
Not true. Not necessarily.
Not always true. Sometimes true.
Can you expand on that?
Well, yeah. So we all have eye patterns, and the eyes really are the window to the soul. They reveal where we're accessing information from, and everybody's are different. Sometimes they follow that eye pattern chart that you see in NLP books, and sometimes they don't. But what's important is, there's a use for that chart. It's only sometimes accurate in lie detection. So you got to compare people to themselves.
Got it. And the second myth is that liars don't make eye contact. See, for me, this is one that I've always kind of relied on, where, I felt like, somebody's looking up to the left and they're kind of looking around and wandering and they're not making eye contact with me. That was for me a number one indicator of, I don't know that they're necessarily being truthful. What do you say about that?
Some people have a look to talk rule and others don't. And that's developed when we're young. Like you look your father in the eye, young lady, like things like that. And other people don't. Like, my eyes roll around in my head all the time. And so you can't base it just on that. But if there's a shift, right? If there's a shift at an important time, then you may have something. And actually, one of the studies shows, I mean, there's all sorts of studies. One of the studies shows that liars will look at you more because they are trying to determine if you're on board or not. So, and we saw that in the Chris Watts interrogation video.
Can you talk? And what was the Chris Watts interrogation? What was that
Chris
about?
Watts. So he was a fellow over here, not far from me, and it was 2-3 years ago now. And he killed his wife and his pregnant wife and his 2 kids and stuffed them in an oil well. And he gave this interview because, and it was an interesting interview because it was 7 minutes unedited. Because most of the time what they do, they switch back and forth between cameras, and then you can't see some of the stuff, and some of it ends up being voiceover, and it really kind of wrecks the lie detection that's possible. But anyway, he and then I saw it again. I had to file an open records request with Weld County to get the interrogation video, but he he would look directly at the interrogator, and then he said, "I did not kill my kids." Right? And so what did he do? He whispered, kill my, he couldn't even say it at full volume, right? So that's so you see how that's a shift in his volume, right? While he looked straight at the interrogator, where he wasn't looking straight at her before that, right? So it's all these little things that kind of add up. And then they did construct a situation where he melted down and told everybody what he did.
She's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about the eyes, and I thought this was really interesting, for me. Looking to the right basically means that they're trying to construct their story, they're trying to remember the facts, they're trying to, put together, a cohesive statement, if you will.
It can be, yeah.
It can be. Okay.
It's not all the time, but it can be. Okay. We saw Aaron Rodgers. I caught Aaron Rodgers doing that because he had his big thing about him. He was immunized and versus did he get a vaccine and things like that. And anyway, he was very classic. His eyes darted to the viewer's left as he said, I can't remember his exact phrase, but anyway, I caught him at that. So they happened to be congruent at that moment.
So that's what you were talking about. So when people look to your left just before they answer your question, they are often constructing or fabricating their answer.
They can be, yeah. Now, if someone is left-handed versus right-handed, that can come into play there. But so really, like the safest thing is to compare people to themselves.
Got it. And the last one is defocused eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So defocused eyes, meaning that they're telling their story. They're often going into brain space of constructing the image of what they're saying instead of remembering it. So they're visualizing what it was as opposed to trying to gain a verbal recollection. Is that what that means?
They're visualizing what they wished had happened as opposed to what did happen. So that can happen. And we saw that on real clear on several years ago. The football player Manti Te'o, he was catfished, and he got on Oprah or some talk show, and you saw that really clearly. Yeah. So not everyone does it, but it's like when you see it, you go, oh, okay, that's probably what's going on, right? And then of course there's more questions you want to ask, and then you can get to the truth.
Absolutely. So I don't want to give away too much because I want people to get your book, because I'm telling you, this is before my next interrogation. This is I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to go back through some of these things. But for those of you that are listening, right, there's something in here that Traci refers to as pacifiers. And these are things that are done or can be done during a tense situation, right? So you've gone through your initial questions of, tell me your name, can you remember some of the facts? And then all of a sudden, something in your mind starts to go, don't know if that's adding up. So now you ask that trigger question, right? And now all of a sudden you have somebody cracking their knuckles, right? Hugging their self, trying to
like real tight.
Right.
Yeah, they can be doing their fingers like this. It's a pacifier. It can be called an adapter. Playing with their ring, like that, smoothing their pants, doing their hair,
drumming their fingers, yawning.
Yep. All those, they let off stress.
See, I always thought when somebody yawned during one of my investigations, it was because I was so boring. Now I know that that's a pacifier situation. So really, rocking, bouncing, wiggling, crossing their legs, hair, like you said, hair touching, grooming, sitting on their feet. What does that mean? Sitting on their feet?
Well, if someone doesn't have their feet on the ground, right? So they kind of sit on their feet.
Got it. So, okay. That makes perfect sense to me. So, all right. So I think we've talked a good bit about this. Where can people pick up your book?
2 places. You can get it on Amazon always. If you order it straight from me, I ship both of them. I make more money. It's at bodylanguagetrainer.com, and you can get it. It's on Kindle as well. So yeah, Christmas is coming. It's a good time to know about lie detection.
What a great gift to give a spouse.
Actually, people don't want to give it to their spouse.
Well, I'm sure when Jill gets home tonight, she's going to be like, "Where's that book?"
Probably so. You're busted. Yep. You're busted.
I'm always busted. And then you also have your own podcast and your TV channel. Where can people find you online?
Okay. So we talked about my website, bodylanguagetrainer.com. My podcast is called Truth, Lies, and Cover-Ups. And you can find that anywhere you get your podcast. And I do have a YouTube channel. You can look me up. What's exciting is that I'm working in Hollywood to produce a show by the same name as my podcast called Truth, Lies, and Cover-Ups. So we're working on that. You can see the trailer. I have a trailer for it. But here's what you want to do. When you want to know more, you want to see the trailer, you want to find my podcast, you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and Facebook and all that, just pick up your phone. I know your phone's right by you. Text the word lies, LIES, to the number 22828. So text the word lies to the number 22828. And what will happen is I'll send you all that stuff. I'll send you videos of famous people lying on TV, and you'll be on my mailing list for a once a month update on who's lying. And it gets to be pretty fun way to keep in touch.
Absolutely. And in the very beginning, we talked about the exercise that you and I got to do out in Las Vegas. Was I telling the truth about being at the Playboy Mansion, or was I lying?
No, you weren't. Okay, so let's talk about what happened. So I handed Sean, I handed everybody on the panel, there's a small panel, 2 envelopes. They didn't know which one was a lie, which one was a truth. I had interviewed you beforehand, and and you opened up one that was a lie. And the deal is you open it up, you sell it to the audience like it's the truth, and we'll ask you questions for a minute or 2 and then tell if you're lying or not. And so, no, you did a horrible job lying. And, and you have not been to the Playboy Mansion. So no, it always gets to be really fun. I do that in my keynotes that are an hour and 15 or longer. And I always give that question to a guy, because it turns out the women don't appreciate it as much. So,
well, I will say this to any of the associations, and I have a lot of medical and professional associations that actually tune in and log on to my podcast. If in 2022 you're looking for a keynote speaker, you're looking for somebody to bring, a fun exercise, something that allows a lot of audience participation, because there were a lot of questions that were asked of me, and I did a horrible job of selling it. I think one of the questions I was asked was, "How did you get there?" And I was like, "On a private jet." And they were like, "With who?" And I was like, "Bill Clinton." And I think everybody had that. Now, wait a minute. It is possible that I was on a private jet with Bill Clinton. Just the fact that it was me, the likelihood of me being on a plane with Bill Clinton heading out to anywhere was,
well, that's the thing. When you're forced to lie and make stuff up really quick, that's when you see stuff go off the rails. So yeah, we got you. You're bad.
Yeah, I was busted. I'm a terrible liar. That's why I don't do it. So, all right. So this brings us to the end of our podcast with Traci Brown. Traci, thank you so much for being here today. I've had a ton of laughs. I've had a great time. I hope you enjoyed being here. I know that our viewers today across the different streaming platforms, I was watching and keeping an eye on the number of folks that we had, and we maintained almost 100% viewership all the way until the very end, which is great. I can't wait for this to get out onto the podcast platforms for everybody to be able to listen to this on your own free time. For those of you that want to watch the actual video portion of this, you'll be able to find it on a number of the streaming platforms that we talked about at the beginning of the show. As always, what I want to say to you is thank you so much for tuning in, logging on, and hanging out with me. And again, my very special guest today, Traci Brown, a master at talking about how to detect lies, fraud, and identity theft. And again, remember, folks, be good to yourself, but more importantly, be good to each other. And until next time, take care.